Let's talk about how marriage-based green cards are going to be affected in 2025 or later during this new Trump administration. So for those of you who are new, my name is Pouyan Darian. I'm an immigration attorney, and I actually focus the majority of my practice on marriage-based immigration. So these are the changes that I expect will affect a lot of my marriage-based clients. I have a lot of them, and I've been getting a lot of these questions, so I'll just tell you what I've been telling them. So the first thing that I expect to happen is that every marriage-based case is likely to get an interview moving forward. There was a policy under Biden, which was a really good policy, and it sped up the immigration process and made the process less expensive for the government and everyone else involved, where if you submit a substantial amount of evidence showing that you are married in good faith and it's obviously not a fake marriage, then the government had the option to waive the immigration interview. And basically, you would start the process, and at some point thereafter, you would just get an approval notice in the mail, and then your green card would be mailed out, and you and your spouse never had to show up for an intimidating interview with immigration. But now, what we can expect, and this isn't just for marriage-based green cards. We can also expect this for parents of US citizens or asylees, people who are granted asylum who are applying for permanent residence, people who have U visas who are applying for permanent residence, domestic violence victims. Anyone who's eligible for permanent residence can expect an interview. And this is a big problem because, first of all, it's going to substantially delay the immigration process. The immigration officers, who have limited resources as it is, are going to be forced to interview everyone, even if it's a straightforward case, and even if they already know they're going to approve the case. The second problem with interviewing everyone is it just creates a lot of inefficiency, and it creates way more ways where immigration officers can deny your case. For example, one of the things that I talk about a lot in my channel is fraudulent intent. So that means when someone enters the US on a non-immigrant visa, such as a tourist visa, they must generally have the intention to depart the United States after visiting. But when they apply for permanent residence, let's say, for example, someone enters as a tourist and then they overstay, and 2 years later, they marry a US citizen and apply for permanent residence. In that situation, the immigration officer might ask, what was your intention at the moment you entered the United States? Did you intend to just visit and leave? Or was your plan all along to overstay and eventually become a permanent resident? So currently, if you don't apply for permanent residence within 90 days of your entry, the government will usually not ask a lot of questions. It's not presumed that you entered with fraudulent intent. But I expect that might change, and many immigration officers might be asking way more questions about what your mental state was at the moment you entered the United States. Another thing that I expect more of are Stokes interviews. So if you don't know what that is, it's okay. A Stokes interview is when the immigration fraud unit interrogates both spouses separately to look for major differences in their story. Like, for example, they ask one spouse, what was the most recent movie you saw in the movie theater? And they say one movie, and then the other spouse says another movie, or they say, we never even go to the movies. That would be a major difference in your responses. Or they ask one spouse, who cooked breakfast this morning? And they said, we didn't even eat breakfast. And then the other spouse said, my wife cooked eggs for us. It was delicious. That would be a major difference. And the immigration officers can use the differences in your responses to deny your green card application. When a case gets flagged for fraud in this case, it could also drag the process out several years. So one of the major changes I expect in the next 4 years are substantial processing time delays in how long it takes to become a permanent resident, especially through a marriage-based petition. Currently, I have many cases that from start to finish get approved in 6 months or less. Not all, but some, and many actually, get approved in 6 months or less. I expect those processing times to increase to 18 months within the next year or two, and that might be conservative. They might increase by more than that, according to some of my colleagues, but only time will tell. We don't know exactly how long the processing delays will be, but I expect them to be pretty substantial. I feel particularly bad for marriage-based green card cases that are trying to do everything the right way legally, where the immigrant spouse is not in the United States and they need to go through the consulate process to enter the US legally. I expect consular processing to be completely gutted, where they have fewer resources, cases take way longer to process, and people are separated from their spouses and other family members for way longer than the current processing times. One of the more annoying things that the Trump government can do that they did last time is randomly change the addition of the forms that are being accepted by USCIS. So currently and historically, when you submit an application, there's an addition date on the form. And usually when the government changes the edition, like they have a new version of the form available, they give like a 2-month grace period where, you know, within 2 months, you can use the old version of the form or the new version, but like there's a cutoff date after which they will only accept the new edition of the form. During the end of Trump's last presidency, they realized they can dramatically cut down on the number of legal immigration cases by just rejecting forms. So we would mail out a bunch of green card applications on Monday, and then on Tuesday, the government would just change the edition of the form. And like 2 weeks later, they would mail all of my applications back to me and say, you submitted it on the wrong edition of the form. And they even did this sometimes when they had a cutoff date that hadn't been triggered yet. And by the time they mail it back to me, that new cutoff date was triggered. There's no real benefit to appealing or complaining. It's just cheaper to refile it and comply with the new edition of the form. This was a huge problem then, and I expect it to happen again. I also expect some new forms to come out. So the last time Trump was president, he created this new form called I-944, Declaration of Self-Sufficiency. And this form added a lot of headache to the green card process. We had to include a lot more information about the intending immigrant spouse. For example, what languages do they speak? What is their highest level of education? We had to include copies of their degrees and diplomas. What are your job skills? How much resources do you have available to you? And they were basically using all of this information to deny applications for the likelihood of becoming a public charge in the future, even though in most of the cases it was unlikely that the person was actually going to become a public charge in the future. I expect something like this to happen again. The last time it happened, a court shut it down and said you didn't properly implement these new rules and procedures. But this time around, I think that the Trump administration will do a better job at implementing their agenda. So that's something I'm not looking forward to. All right, guys, so that brings us to the end of today's video. As actual changes are implemented, I'll be sure to create up-to-date videos explaining what's gonna happen. This video has been mostly speculative based on what Trump did the last time around, what they've mentioned is gonna happen in Project 2025, which, despite what people think, actually wants to reduce all legal immigration as well as illegal immigration. And think what you will about that. If you are interested in applying for family-based immigration, if you're marrying a US citizen, or your spouse is an immigrant, or you want to petition for your parents, I do all family-based immigration. Please reach out. I would love to have you as a client, and me and my team would love to assist you. If you're new to my channel, be sure to subscribe. I put out videos several times a week, and I'll talk to you guys next time for another video.